Welcome to the Prof Talk Pod, brought to you by the Engaged Professor. Every 2 weeks, join us as we talk about tips and tricks to help you connect with your students, engage with industry, and stay up to date on all the teaching trends. We'll give you actionable strategies that will help improve your teaching today. Thank you for being here. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to episode 16 of the Prof Talk Pod. My name is Becky Aiken, here with my co-host and colleague, Galen Clavio. And today's topic is going to be talking about why you should go to graduation and potentially why you should shift your mindset about going to graduation. And this is something that I've heard over the course of my career. Probably Galen hears a little bit more about than I do in his administrative role. A lot of faculty, I think, have a little bit of a negative perception because when we go to graduation, we have been to graduation, every year or every other year. Maybe you've been to 5, 15, 20 graduations, and it's the same.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was at Illinois State, actually, our university president at the time I was there, he's not there anymore, but I'm not kidding, told the same Mother's Day joke at every single graduation every single year.
It's a fireable
And
offense as far as I'm concerned.
right, but when you think about it, unless somebody's had multiple kids graduate, the only people who knew that were the faculty who went every year to
Right.
graduation or every other year to graduation. And I would often hear just kind of this common sense of dreading having to go. I don't want to go. How can I get out of it? And it really made me think about what graduation means and who it means something to. And I've tried, maybe my first couple years, I was kind of like, why do I need to go? But I've really shifted my mindset recently. And I actually get sad when I have to miss graduation. Like a couple years ago, I missed graduation at University of the Pacific for my brother's graduation. And I was really sad about that because I felt like I knew those students, and I felt like they would notice if I wasn't there. Now, whether they would or not, I don't know because I don't ask them when I'm not there. But I do know that every time I go to graduation, there's lots of hugs, there's lots of meet my parents,
Mm-hmm.
thank you. You hear all these wonderful things about yourself that you didn't even know were maybe true. I mean, I've had students who I thought could not stand me introduce me to my parents, and they'll say, "Oh, this is you're Dr. Aiken. They talked about you all the time, and we're so glad that you were there." And in my head, I'm like, they said nice things? I'm so shocked by
Yeah.
that. And so I really think, part of it is it's something that we should feel expected to do probably because it is an important part of the process. We are supposed to value the degree and the education. And so the culmination of that in our minds as academics should have value.
Mm-hmm.
And two, we really should think about how students perceive it because they're the ones that have, for a lot of them, first person to graduate. Maybe they struggled through 5 or 6 years to make it to that stage. And oftentimes, as we've talked about, if you're an engaged faculty member, you're somebody that they want to see them finish this out because you've been instrumental in their success. But sometimes there's just such a negative perception of having to do this thing for a couple hours on a Saturday.
So it's interesting because, I've been in a bunch of different higher ed environments, but I've always been at Research One institutions. And, so I was at the University of Miami. I did not wear this on purpose. It just happened to be what was on my body when we sat down to record this. But Miami was really interesting because it's a smaller school. People don't realize this, but it's only got like a 10,000 person undergraduate population. It's like 15,000 students overall. And I felt like there was an emphasis there to faculty to take part in the graduation process because it was a tighter knit community. And Miami's kind of a unique campus and a unique school in a lot of ways from that perspective, I think. I come to Indiana, and Indiana, there are some parts of campus where people will go to graduation for faculty members, but a lot of times they don't at all. And I've tried to think about why is that? And it's a combination of a couple of things, I think. You mentioned, some of them, but one of the things I've noticed is at heavy research institutions or or like, are ones where you've got a lot of faculty who view themselves primarily as either A, researchers or as mentoring graduate students. They view undergraduate, especially, which tends to be the larger graduation ceremonies, as someone else's job. Is not something they are required to be at. They're not always encouraged to be there. You'll get one email saying, "Hey, we'd love to have you out," and so forth. But it's not always one of those situations where you're there. Now, what I like about what we do in the school that I'm in is we actually have a separate graduation ceremony that's just for our school. And that's where most of the faculty go. And it's still not, I'd say 50%, but it's close to 50% of faculty. It's a smaller ceremony. There's a lot of mingling with students. And then for the big ceremony, that's kind of viewed as the parents and kids. And, you're not even walking across stage there. The only time you're going to go as a faculty member is if you have a doc student that is being hooded. And that's a separate thing in the eyes of a lot of people. So I think there's a couple of things to take out of that. It's like, at a big school, big state school, or big research school, it almost seems too impersonal to go to the big ceremonies. And if you're going to go, you're going to go primarily for your graduate students. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think there's been a real drift in the last 50 years for faculty feeling like the teaching of students process is somebody else's job. I'm just kind of in the mix, but I'm here to do research, and that's that. But then I also think that when you get faculty into a situation where they're able to directly see the students that they've had in class walking across the stage, that there is a little bit more of an investment there. And so it is a balance that you have to strike. And it does require you to kind of feel like you're part of the mission of the university. And that's where I think universities and schools don't do a great job all the time, or most of the time, of making faculty feel like they're part of the process. Now that it takes two to tango there, obviously, but I think for a lot of faculty, they've kind of gotten used to this idea that that's just something run by another department on campus, as opposed to being something they have an integral part in.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And for larger universities, having those individual school ceremonies, that was common at Illinois State. We had separate ones even at the school University of the Pacific, which is a small school. That I think encourages faculty to go because it feels a little more personal. And I still think there's value in that large ceremony, just from we as much as I'm a marketer, so I'm a branding marketing person. Having a strong faculty presence shows an engaged faculty who care, which is beneficial from an image standpoint. Now, that's not maybe the only reason you should go, but we have to remember that we are going to continue to be in competition for students, and showing that we are engaged and care about student success is one way to maybe put a leg up on the competition. But definitely those smaller ceremonies, you sometimes don't recognize that you might be the only person there for those students. Like, not everybody's family can travel
Right.
or is interested in supporting them, and you as the faculty member might be the only one that shows up for them. And even if you had them in one class, them seeing 10 people from the program is impactful, and them believing that this is a valuable, important occasion. I have
Yeah.
a lot of students who are like, I'm not going to graduation. Graduation's silly, because nobody's ever really told them that a lot of people don't have a college degree. There's like this assumption that everybody has a bachelor's degree, but the statistics do not bear that out. And we know the retention rates and the graduation rates are not that high across institutions of higher education. So there's a lot of people that start that never graduate. So it actually is an impressive accomplishment to finish a bachelor's degree, whether people believe it or not. But there's this perception that it's like, that's just annoying. I don't want to go. So I think we're kind of part of changing that perception, and our engagement and our rethinking it also rubs off on the students, right? Like, if I say I'm going to graduation, then students might, not just because of me, I'm saying faculty in general, students might first see it as actually mattering or meaning something. And maybe that even helps those who are walking but
Mhm.
didn't ever finish that final internship or capstone experience to actually finish them and really graduate. I know lots of people from when I was an undergrad who I learned in less than the 5 years never finished their degree because they didn't finish that last thing. So placing that value on it, I think, is something that us going also kind of conveys to students.
No, I agree. And look, I think a lot of it really, what you're talking about, I think, is a faculty driven viewpoint of being a part of something that's not just a job that you go to, but instead is more of a community. And, it's a challenge because, I mean, when you're a doc student, oftentimes, like, you're not really included in any of those things. You'd go through graduation yourself, but you don't really feel like you're part of the university community in most cases. You often just kind of feel like you're there as a student, and that's that. And then you go to a new institution, and a lot of times I think new institutions do a really bad job of onboarding faculty into feeling like they're part of a broader community. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I think that the progressive layers of administration that sit on top of each of the schools and departments, and the focus that so many people are supposed to have on research instead of teaching, ends up really making you feel like you're an independent contractor who just happens to have an office at a WeWork that has a bunch of buildings that have logos on them, as opposed to, hey, I'm a faculty member at Indiana, or I'm a faculty member at Kansas, or I'm a faculty member at Florida, or wherever you're at. I think a lot of what you're talking about, I think you have to emotionally incentivize people to feel like they're part of the community that they're in. You can't expect them to come in and do it themselves. Uh, you know, when I see emails that have gone out in the past trying to get people to go to graduation to carry like the standard for our school or for other schools, it's always like pleading, like, please come do this. Like, and I think there needs to be a more direct explanation. Like, we really think you should be involved in this. This would be great to have you here. Here's what it means to students. Here's what it means to the institution. And to me, that's the point that's missing. Like, you're bringing up a lot of good things. The problem is, I think in most cases, institutions of higher learning aren't communicating with their faculty and saying, we'd love to have you as a part of this. And it's important that you're a part of it because of the community aspects of the university are important to our students, and it's important to what we're trying to put forward. Because frankly, I think for most administrators, it's not important in their eyes. Like, what's important is, are we getting a new cohort of students in? Are they graduating within 6 years? Are we growing enrollments or growing revenue? Are we doing X, Y, and Z? It's a very bottom line driven industry, and I understand why. But what frustrates me is what makes college special, and where honestly I think, you think about all the attacks on higher education that come from various places. A lot of it is centered around this idea that, well, you're going to take a bunch of classes that don't matter to what you want to do, and it's not a guarantee of getting a career in something, and they don't even teach financial literacy. Like, what do you do? Like, stuff like that. But where college is so valuable and so beneficial is in many cases those community aspects, and feeling like you're part of not just a smaller community in your degree or your program that's bigger than you, but that you're part of a larger group of people that went to this institution. And you're still talking about a society here in the US where only between 35 and 40% of the population will go to college. People think it's much more than that. Well, that's a relatively select group. It's okay to promote, like, we want you to feel like you're part of this inclusive and dynamic group of people that are all going through this experience together. You have to have the faculty plugged into it. It can't just be a situation where the students see their academic advisors and they see maybe the one or two lecturers that they regularly have in their major, and then that's that. It really needs to be something more systemic. The universities have to be able to put that forward, though, to faculty and say, this is why we want to get you involved in this, because it helps our branding. It helps this place feel more special. And that's really important, not just to students, but also their parents, and also to people who might be coming down the pike who want to get involved in the school, as well as people 30 years down the road who might donate back to the school. They're a lot more likely to do that if they felt an affinity, if they felt like they were part of a community. This is one of those steps that universities could undertake to try to make them feel better about the experience once they're gone.
Well, and I think you make a really good point is that part of it for faculty might be the messaging coming down is, those are emails just like many of the emails you mentioned on the podcast that get deleted, right? Like your regalia, rent it now, graduation is coming up, sign up to bear the flag. There's a potential way to switch that to be, you were chosen. Every year we choose a faculty member based on student voting or suggestions to do this thing that then becomes an honor versus a, I guess nobody else is going to volunteer, so I'm going to do it this time attitude. And that might help shift it. But I really think you're right. The messaging and from the organizational perspective, trying to understand, we talk so much about belongingness and building community for students and how we do that in our programs as they work throughout the process. But not always do administrators do a good job of building community for faculty,
Mhm.
and they host new faculty groups and those kind of things, but it's hard to understand the why behind that, and sometimes we don't communicate the why, and it's not
I,
always assumed. It's not always easy to see the why when you're somebody in it.
well, and I'll say this, like I've been doing this now for 15 years, 18 years really, but 15 years here. And it's the same people showing up to graduations and volunteering for events over and over again. And I'm always great. And I was one of those people when I was a faculty member. And, now I'm at all the events or most of them because I'm an administrator. I'm always appreciative of those people. But the problem is you cannot show up to any of the events and it's the exact same experience. Like you get no rewards for showing up. And so it's tough because you don't want to reduce everything to an incentive structure where it's like, well, we'll give you these things if you show up to graduation. That's a bad precedent to set. But then how else do you incentivize other than trying to explain, here's the framework through which we think this is important. Here's why it matters. Here's why we want you involved. Will you consider it? Maybe you only get one or two additional people to participate at that point. That's a start. And if it becomes a culture that way, that starts to build from the ground up. But I think that message has to come from the top down. So, to go back to your original premise of this show or this podcast, it's like, yes, faculty need to have a more positive attitude towards attending graduations because it does matter. And you've listed a lot of great reasons why to the individual students and their families. That's really impressive. Like I've had hundreds of like students and their parents come up to me. Now I'm unique in terms of I deal with undergraduates very closely in mass. Like everybody knows who I am at the school. And so that's a different type of experience than the average faculty member. But every faculty member, if they teach undergrad at all, or grad for that matter, they've got several students that know who they are, who would value them being there because it is a culmination type of experience. And I do think that that's important. And it's a full circle moment for a lot of those people. If you had them in class as a sophomore or junior, and then they see you at the end of the finish line and their parents see you at the end of the finish line, I really do think that has a lot of long-term positive aspects to it.
You know, Other than the student perspective, if nothing else, going to graduation, it is really easy, I think, in April of the year when if you especially if you have seniors who might be having some senioritis, you as a teacher or professor also start to feel a little bit frustrated, maybe less than happy with your job, thinking about what if I went back into the world and got a job where I didn't have my, career controlled by young people evaluating me or by the research world that I live in. What if I got into industry and made more money? All of these things sometimes start to creep in. And when you go to graduation, you actually see the outcome that is being produced by the place that you work outside of the research, because research is also really important and there are great outcomes there, but you see the human outcome, and it often can remind you why you might have been doing this, especially if you're at a teaching school or if you got into this for teaching in that exact moment where you're ready to like throw in the towel and you're just so glad the year's over and it's summer. So there's one like personal benefit. The second personal benefit is you get to wear your Harry Potter robes, and if you bought them when you graduated with your PhD like I did, they need to get out of the closet at least once a year.
I agree with that. I still rent my regalia. I should probably at this point buy it because I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. I'll get right on that. So
And then you have an automatic Halloween costume. So once I start reading Harry Potter to my kids, I am already prepared for family costume day.
you're that, and then you need to visit Indiana, where we have a memorial union that looks like Hogwarts. So you'll be in great shape all the way around.
I'm gonna remember that. We're planning a year of Halloween to come visit you and your family
You
so that we may
hey,
take our Harry Potter picture.
bring them to our neighborhood, because this is the most insane trick or treating neighborhood in Bloomington. Like, people drive in from other neighborhoods to trick or treat in our neighborhood. So it would be perfect all the way around.
Oh, that's great. Well, that is it for our conversation on graduation today. I actually would love to read some comments on other faculty's thoughts, ideas you have for encouraging participation or experiences that you had. Because I think the more we talk about our positive attitude toward graduation, we can maybe have a grassroots approach that hopefully, if we can get enough administrators to listen to our podcast, they can come up with some ways to message as well. So thank you for being here, and we'll look forward to having you listen to us next time.